At first, someone says that they never believed in the phenomenon that people called the light at the end of the tunnel, and those rare occasions where, after going through experiences of near death, people say they saw a light with cold sweat running down their faces, and yet he is there, in that supposed tunnel, but he wonders how he died. After all, the last thing he remembers is being alone in his room, looking from above at the city and everything that happened below. When he felt his body heavy when going to bed, he wonders if he was poisoned or murdered, and Gray forces himself to think about it because many wanted him dead. After all, he was a king. He says that no matter how much he wants to understand his death, he can't do it, nothing more about it. And he says he has no choice but to leave it aside, and it's better not have any baby skins with wings at the end. Then he sees a light that stays stronger and stronger, and someone talks to a man or a woman saying that he is a healthy boy. Then he wonders if he was just born, and notices that the light at the end of the tunnel is the light that passes through a woman at birth. But he thinks that this is not important, and his parents keep praising him, and he says that wherever he is, he can understand the language, and that is a good sign, that he talks about that bright and gentle smile that permeates maternal love. And he says he can't let go to think about how beautiful and charming she is. And he also says that with a strong jaw, a fierce and sharp look, he is sure that that man is serious and severe, but that the same man he just praised starts asking for his newly born son and call him daddy. And that makes Artes forget all the praise he gave him. So he thinks about his surroundings, which seem quite normal. And he also thinks about everything that is seeing on the walls, wondering where he is. Then it's said that the weeks have been passing slowly. And despite her mother Alice being kind and good-hearted, she is the one who keeps family networks, and he says that his father Regnolds is a trustworthy and charismatic man. If he ignores your occasional childishness, and he says that while he was happy to crumbs, having been born into a loving family, his life was filled with difficulty that he would not give up, nor to his enemies. And he talks about the little control over his limbs, and also the inability to control the need for that prison of flesh he was in. So he remembers being changed by his mother and being very embarrassed. And he says that maybe the years of mental strength as the king, a representative of his country, and the little spark of hope that this is all just a dream were the only two things that kept his sanity. And he says that it seems like he was transported to the past, period archaic, and he wonders if in the past people carried weapons, so normally, and he assumes that those vials of suspicious-looking liquids they are trading with, medicines are being sold legally. And his mother tells Art that he must be tired, asking how about they go home now. And then he starts to fall asleep. And for a while then he says that knowledge is strength. He has had access to his surroundings in the last few weeks, and he is confident that he knows what he expects. So his father picks him up asking how your kitten is, and then he starts attacking the child. And his mother asks what he is doing. And the boy in turn thinks that what was expected from such a weak body. And he says that never thought he would be reduced to state by a simple throw. And his father keeps talking that his father did this when he was little, and says that his son must be having fun. But the boy in turn is almost vomiting, until his father gets careless and hits him with his knee. The boy on a corner, and then his mother appears very upset behind. Then he made the boy cry and tries to calm the Art down by telling him that he will fix it using magic in front of him. Then the boy is amazed at what he is seeing and thinks that maybe he spoke too soon. Because in the end, he doesn't understand anything about this world, and remembering the past, he thinks that led armies, and also won the duel against representatives of countries from all over the world. And still, even with all his achievements, he has never been as proud as he is now, because he can finally crawl, and his mother starts asking Ray not to leave the boy, hit his head on that corner, and they start to come up with a plan to not let the boy hit head nowhere. And then Artsy goes to the mirror and looks at himself, and they are both amazed at. He's watching himself and he thinks it's been months, but he's still not used to his name and says that like the former king, Artsy is very cute to him. He says that despite everything looking at him in that mirror, he has to admit he is absolutely adorable. And he bosses. The girls get ready to have their hearts broken. And after that, his mother puts him to sleep and leaves room. But he wakes up again and thinks about starting a new mission, throwing his blanket out of the crib and throwing himself on top of her. And he says that now that Alice thinks he fell into he has about an hour of sleep before she comes back to check on him. And he sneaks out from the room and heading to his destination. And then he crawls to the library and thinks it was a success. And in that he takes one of the books, saying that since he discovered that place, every night he has been sneaking there to learn more about that world. And he talks about Dikatan, a continent in which he was born and is made up of 3 great kings. One of them is Eleanor, the elven kingdom deep in the forest, Harvey, vast underground kingdom, Elar of the dwarves, and Sopin, the human kingdom, is easily the region with the largest population. And he says that both this world and their previous one share a system of monarchy. But the right to government there is not conquered, and he previously discovered that that world is less developed compared to the one he lived. So he starts reading that book and finally finds where he left off, and says that in this world they have a vital force called ki, used by practitioners to strengthen their bodies and weapons through rigorous training. But this world he's in has a similar force called mana, but different from ki that exists only within a person. Mana is spread everywhere, and he continues reading quite comfortably, and he thinks that the power to control mana is mostly genetic, and usually only 1 in 100 children have that ability. And he says that mana can be used in many ways, and the most common are strengthening and conjuration. He says that strengtheners incorporate mana into their bodies, allowing them to enhance their strength, agility, and defensive capabilities. However, their weakness is their limited range, and sorcerers emit mana outside of themselves, allowing them to manipulate their surroundings to their will. However, they must use mana from his surroundings to complement his spells. So he says that his mana is what they call a deviant. More specifically, Asura meme. He says that they are a rare type of wizard, capable to generate a unique type of mana with healing properties. And he says that according to that book, a wizard's awakening occurs between the beginning of puberty and the end of adolescence. And he speaks, which is when their mana cores manifest, and the mana core is eerily similar to the chi center from their previous life, and to form their chi center. Children are taught to meditate, to feel the mana particles spread throughout your bodies, and gather them in one place. And so he starts to think about putting it into practice, and he says that he imagines it should be the same in his address. And so he can quickly gather some energy in the center of his abdomen. And when he thinks it's working, his mother goes and catches him, thinking he made her worry, but then she asks Arce if he's having trouble pooping. But he gets upset with his mother because he was stuck starting his journey to be the greatest wizard in the world, and sends her not make her look like a constipated baby. But in doing so, she ends up feeling the pain that was coming from his diaper, and thinks that he must not be having any difficulty, and says that it is what he needs to exchange. And he thinks that during his concentration, he actually ran out emerging his diaper. But he says that the reason for the lack of technological development, he ended discovering it, and it is due to the existence of magic. And so, a while later, your mother begins writing, saying that it's been 2 years. And she says that still with each passing day, it seems like is learning even more about her baby. And she says she has come to the conclusion that Arthur should be the cutest baby there is. Sosha says that with her little reddish brown hair and with sky blue eyes that looketh her almost intelligently, she knows that if she doesn't become a reliable and strict mother, he will get into trouble in the future. And she also says that it's not like she can't trust the king, and in that she remembers when she saw her husband teaching fencing to her newborn son. And she looked at the two of them with Avery scary, and she is discredited because she caught their husband trying to teach her baby to fight. Then she starts to smile and says that was when he could barely crawl, and at that she remembers when he took him out. And says that one thing he noticed is that Arthur absolutely loves got a merchant street in the center of AshBorn. She says that because of that, instead of buying groceries once or twice a week, They got to the city center every 2 days, and in that she remembers him looking at the precious stones and being enchanted by the magic of a man, and he says he's not spoiling him too much. It's all about having fresh food at home, and for educational reasons. And she is surprised at how fast Arthur grows up, and imagines what he will be like when he grows up. And in that, she has no doubt that he will be interested in becoming an adventurer. But she can't help but worry, and she just hopes he does better than the young fools who try to become famous as adventurers. And she also says that now she wanted to do something about her habit of sneak into the study room. And she says she's thinking about moving his crib there, but thinks that's a topic for another day. Meanwhile, Arthur is on the balcony looking out window. Your father trains, and he says that 2 years have passed since he did his first and difficult pass to the study room, and he says that he has learned a lot since then. And he says that he is being fascinating to learn new things every day. So he watches his father using magic. Then you notice that he has been humming some things for a few minutes. He is concentrating as much as possible, and then he starts to levitate stones. And he wonders what kind of magical phenomenon he is going to cause, and he lifts the stones into the air, but ends up not doing anything extravagant. And Arthur is disappointed. But his father thinks it was incredible, and Arthur is incredible, thinking it took him 3 years of extreme concentration to do something that could be done with much less effort physical. And then, his mother goes to him asking if he's watching his father. She is confused, because he ruined the front garden again, and then his father goes back to tidying up the garden, and Arthur says who discovered very early on that his father is an enhancer. And he wonders what he will be when his core of mana awakens, and so his father returns to focus. But this time he starts using attacks, physical and martial arts in the air. And Arthur looks at that and gives a smile, turning his back. But then heeks. Do you think there is something in front of you that could be quite scary? Which is the descent of that ladder. Then he begins to tremble, turns his back and begins to descend with the greatest caution in the world. Then his mother sees him closing his eyes in fear and thinks her baby needs a nap. Picking him up, and then he looks at the study room and starts asking to go there. And his mother. He says that now is not the time because he has to go to sleep, and says that maybe he can come back later, but he thinks that there is no chance of him going to sleep. So he uses the sacred and secret technique of the spy eyes. And your mother barely resists, and then tries to act strong, but it's not effective at all. And so, she says he can go play a little in the study room, and starts thinking to herself, who is not a proud mother, and says that boys his age need to play a lot, and she did the trick baby-proof room. And he thinks that this is not shameful, as a great warrior must use every arsenal of weapons he has. And then he starts reading, and his mother watches. But then she hears a noise and thinks his father better not have cut down another tree and gone to see what is happening. And when she leaves, she says that his greatest achievement, besides having accumulated the knowledge of that world, is your progress in forming your mana core. And he says that spent the last 2 years moving tens of thousands soft-in mana fragments inside his body, and bringing them together close to his solar plexus. And he says he understands why it takes until adolescence to form, naturally, slowly seeing those fragments move to the center of his body. And he says that it is an era of work, both for his body as well as his mind. But he says that those 2 years were not in vain. And he says that there is only one more fragment missing. And while his mother is outside, an explosion occurs inside their house. And seeing those shrapnel heading towards his wife, Ray goes in front to protect it and is hit by that wave of energy. And after the dust settles, he is quite injured and asks if his wife is okay. But all she can think about is Actor, thinking he is still there. And so he is shocked by what happened and runs inside to get his son. And when he is inside the place, he can't believe what he is seeing. And then he falls to his knees, smiling. The wife asks what happened, and Ray says he has to be joking with him, as he hasn't even turned 3 years old. But he has still developed his mana, and then he sees the boy floating in the middle of the rubble. And in that, the art descends to the ground full of class, and thinks that it feels really good and wonders if this is what it feels like to have a mana core, and say that even the trees look greener. but he is surprised to see the trees from inside home. Then he sees that entire scene destroyed and wonders what the hell happened, asking who were attacked. And the question arises, who dared to destroy a king's house? And a while later he says that, apart from the fact that they had to rebuild the house, a lot happened that last year. And he says that his mother is teaching him to read and write, and he's also learning the basics, mana manipulation and strengthening. And he says that at first, since his body is very little to duel, they only did basic exercises, and then his father helped him a lot with sit-ups and push-ups. And he says that it hasn't been that long since his father decided that he would be all to practice with the wooden sword he gave him for his 3rd birthday. While he thinks and reads, his father arrives saying it's time for them to train, and says he has his swords, they must got there. And outside, his father tells him to remember what he taught, and tells him synchronize the flow of mana with your breathing. And he says that just like the heart and lungs, his nucleus is also an organ. And Arthur wonders if most children in 4 years old can understand such abstract instructions, and in this he begins to prepare for a duel with the sword and goes forth that stick and ends up fighting a good battle with him. And his father keeps encouraging, and Arthur thinks she won't let him rest until he does, and he has little time until dinner time. So he starts to get together and get ready, and in that cuts the stick that his father was holding in half, and his father gets quite scared, and the boy asks if he can gotta study now, and his father ends up allowing him for a while. Later, while Hai's meditating, he says that in that world power is measured by the color of your core. Then he says that the mana core starts completely black, due to the blood and other impurities mixed with the mana particles forming the mana core, and he says that the core becomes spear as the impurities are filtered over time. He says that the order is black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and white. So he says that each stage is divided by 3 solid, dark, and light tones. And he says that the lighter the mana core is, the more pure he would be, and of course the more power he will have. And then his mother interrupts him by calling him for dinner at the table. He wonders if the baby can't have some alone time there, because how is she learn something like this? And then the king talks to his wife saying that he thinks it's time for Arthur have an appropriate man. And there the king is told that the boy is only 4 years old, saying that furthermore he says he would be able to teach him. He says that is exactly that, but had never thought that his son would be a prodigy in mana manipulation at just 4 years old, and he says he's restricting all the great potential the boy has. She says he's not. This means that your child leaves that house to Goto city, that is hundreds of kilometers away. Then he says that Chiros is not just any city. He will make sure that his friend take care of him. And then Arthur starts to get upset with that argument, and the two start looking at him. And this king says that Arthur can also give his opinion by asking if the boy wants to go to a big city to learn from a real teacher. But then the boy is surprised by his parents are letting him decide by asking, this is too much to ask of someone who only has 4 years. But when Arthur asks if there's any way his father and mother can go along to meet the teacher, and they start looking at each other awkwardly, and Arthur starts to wonder if he said something wrong, asking if your sentence was too complex. Then they start laughing, saying that they really didn't. They thought about going together, so she says she'll feel better about it all if he's there when he's tested and meets his teachers. Then his father says that it seems like everyone is going to the city of Chiros, and Arthur says that he was simply scared to see his parents stopping for the 3-week journey. Then time later, while reading, he thinks that already seen that somewhere. But while he's reading, his mother takes the book from him, saying that he has to go to sleep, saying that they are leaving very early tomorrow. So he keeps asking why so fast, and she says that she understands him, saying that he also hates doing things in a hurry. But some old people, her friends and his father's twin horns, are going to Chiros too, and says they will take them with them. Man says that at that moment his father is with the man, so she actually gives him a kiss on the forehead, saying that she'd better not catch him reading again, and says that he can't take some more books during the trip, telling him to go to sleep, and so he agrees. And says that he knows that the twin horns have been in the region for some time, and even says that they helped rebuilding that house, and says that from what he knows the team consists of 2 spellcasters and 3 strengtheners, and he says it can help with any problems they may have. Celebrate, because you're finally going to leave that peaceful, quiet village to see everything that world has to offer, whatever happens. And then the next morning they leave the house and quickly go to meet with the group of twin horns. And when he gets there, his father runs to introduce his son to all of them. And he immediately asks the boy to introduce himself. And he introduces himself very formally, saying, "He's Arthur Lewin, and thanks them for accompanying them to Chiro's, which one of them is surprised by such manners of the child, asking if Ray is sure he's his father and that is Adam Crench. Then another woman grabs him saying he's very cute, telling him to thank her for looking more like her. That one is Angela Rose. And Arthur keeps wondering what's going on because he can breathe in the middle of those airbags. Then the other one arrives saying that Angela's hurting her boy, catching him. That guy is basically a giant and he's Durden Walker, and as soon as she lets go the boy on the floor, Arthur can only think that he's almost like one of those huge, hairy dogs. Then he looks at the last member and Sheely's Flamsworth, and the girl just waves to Arthur and comes out all shy, then tells him not to worry because she just needs to get used to it. A woman speaking introduces herself to him as Ellen Shards, and his father says that now that everyone introduced him must prepare to leave, and so they enter the wagon with everyone ready. He continues on his way, and Arthur marvels looking at the sight as they leave, and during the journey, they go hunting and return with meat and a dinner. Arthur seems quite drunk and Ellen asks how he's doing, asking if he's tired, and she says everything's fine. His first time going on a trip like that, and he agrees with it, that he was definitely only in this life. And Ellen says that his father almost came for the trip throughout Sigabana. And what he calls this boy is really the genius wizard, asking if he really woke up a year ago. So he starts talking to her. In the meantime, Adam notices the two talking and tells Ray that he has to exercise a little before bed, and comments that he said he has been training his son since then, and asks if he could play a little with the boy. But Arthur soon tells him to exercise himself, so Ray says it's okay, but you have to be careful, because they just came out of basic mana strengthening for training of combat. So Adam goes and catches the boy, and Arthur says that normal children his age barely would be able to climb a flight of stairs, but at that moment Noon thinks unusual for the boy to fight. When he comes face to face with Adam, asks the kids he's ready, and Arthur starts swinging that little sword of his, and Adam in turn asks if No showed us strength in his weapon by calling him a boy's cheeky boy genius. So he gets really excited to go after the boy, and Arthur tries to use his telepathy to father and son to get out of that mess, saying that Redhead is out for his blood, asking him to his father to get him out of this mess, so his father can root for him. And he thinks it will be useless and consents to go after Adam, and then incorporates everything he knows from his past life, and mana circulates through all his muscles, attacking Adam. He even thinks it will be easy to defend, but Arthur disappears in front of him and appears behind him, leaving Adam surprised. But when he ends up slipping and thinks it's shit to have this childish body, and Adam in turn realizes this and manages to get out of the way, and soon after attacks the boy ferociously. But Arthur manages to get out of the way, front dodging, and then simply headbutts him in the side of the ribs, throwing him to the side. Before falling, he puts his hand on the ground and tries to kick Arthur, but the boy quickly again. But when he turns his eyes, he is in front of him preparing the attack to stick. Eswing sits from side to side and tries to hit the boy, but then Arthur manages to put out that attack with his little sword, and thinks that at that moment the third Newton's law comes into his mind, and for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And so he gets throw Adam back, but is thrown away, and he thinks that surely that opposing force hurts, and he's all ups about the fall, but Durden goes to Adam and slaps him, saying that he hit very hard. And Adam tells Ray that it didn't teach the guy how to fight, and asks what kind of hellish training he made the go through create that little monster. And in that raven he brags but says she didn't teach that to the boy, and his mother asks Arthur if this is what he has been studying, and he says he learned this by watching his father and reading some books, and Adam certainly doesn't believe it. But this says it doesn't matter, that he's still going to teach some of these movement techniques that he used just now, and in this the boy explains everything to him, saying that he just has to use his supporting leg over the other leg and shoot money. Ashalech's body almost falls, and so he keeps explaining more and more, but Jasmine can't keep up. Little does he say that she's almost there or something, and Adam doesn't seem to be doing anything either, well banging his head against the wall, and he says that many days have passed since they started their journey to the city. Cairo-san during that time his birthday also passed, and he remembers Jasmine giving him a present for his birthday and for his lessons, and the boy says that Adam, Ellen, and their father's training continued with even decent progress. But to their surprise, Jasmine has already managed to successfully learn some techniques. He says he is still surprised by fact that Jasmine was able to understand his instructions so quickly, especially while learning the false step. And a while later, they prepare to continue their journey, and their mother calls him at a certain moment while they are on a road. Green lizards start to approach, and Adam talks to the boy, saying he still remembers how his father put them in all kinds of problem. But Ellen says she's sure the king wasn't the only one causing problems by talking. There was a time when he accidentally put something on something. But Adam started talking, saying that it was just a little hangout, but while they are playing, Arthur asks his mother if she's okay, and she says she's just a little tired talking, that it will be fine, and the boy becomes a little apprehensive and starts reading to distract himself. But then he starts to feel a little chilly, and when he looks to the side, he feels Jasmine wanting. He teaches him even more. But then when he goes back to reading, the cart starts to rock, and they ask what's going on. Then Ellen says they're bandits, and tells him to prepare for fight. And in that, Angel starts to say a spell to protect them, and Alice puts it on in front of Arthur to protect the boy. Arrows. And then with that magic, they manage to deflect them all, and Jasmine and Ray jump out and put themselves in position to fight. And Ellen, for in turn, even with some arrows in his body, he manages to take them out of his flesh and jump to outside the wagon, preparing to attack the enemies. And Arthur thinks the situation is very bad because they are completely surrounded. So the bandits start to approach, and their leader hits the ground with his axe, saying that they got a good hunt, saying that they should just leave women and children alive, telling them to try not to leave scars after all. Goods damaged are worth much less. So Arthur soon thinks it looks like he has been living in a bubble for a long time. He says that he almost forgot that every world has its share of dirt like that guy. Then he starts thinking about that day about damaging merchandise, that soon he takes out this sword, preparing to attack that man, and his mother notices that he's holding it the boy, telling him not to worry, because she is there. So he becomes a little calmer, and in that the bandits start shooting flash again, and Durden tells everyone to get together and take cover and activate the earth wall around the carriage, but the flashes keep coming. And Angel in turn uses his magic to protect the carriage, and the bandits begin to descend towards them. And Ellen ventures to hit them with her flashes, but the leader of the bandits manages to deflect them all attacks her, so Ray goes directly into the line of men where they are throwing their flashes and starts defeating them one by one. But while he was busy with one of them, another one appears trying to hit him with her sword. But Ellen quickly manages to kill him, and downstairs with those who continue to approach the carriage, Jasmine kills him along with Adam, and they continue carrying out a massacre until one of them tries to hit Adam with a heavy weapon. But he manages to dodge quickly and hits that man's head. So Jasmine continues using moves to kill them all until he sees a man using a whip who tries to hit her, and she manages to dodge. The man who was next to her has his legs cut off, and that man tells her to stop resisting because he will train her so well that she will beg to stay with him later. And she gets more and more mad about it, revealing the whole attack of the whip, but she starts to get it superficially, and Arthur thinks she's at a disadvantage because of the opponent's reach. And he wonders if he can help her, because the fighter is one thing, but he wonders if he has any chance against an empowering adult with that body. While he keeps thinking about the carriage being hit from the side, and when they look, it's his father who is being hit, and Arthur soon turns to see who threw him there, and notices that it is the leader of the carriage. So then Arthur says that his mother has to cure his father quickly, but they thinks she has something wrong with his mother, so she starts crying, saying she can't cure him, and he wonders because she isn't the illing her father. So he says it's okay because the injuries aren't threaten her life, and says she better not worry and do her best. So he says to the art, telling him to listen carefully, saying that after his mother uses the spell cure, the bad guys will come after her. He will be able to face the leader, but not if he has to worry about protecting them both. And he tells the boy to take his mother along the trail. They like it and don't stop. But then the boy asks what his father is saying he won't leave him behind because he can fight, and his father knows that. So he starts laughing, talking for the boy to listen, and says that he knows the boy can fight, and that's why he's trusting the boy. His mother to him, telling him to protect her and protect the baby inside her. So everything he passed by his mother's side, all her reactions start to make sense, and his father says he planned tell him when they smell. But this is all happening to Vastan, so the boy touches his father's hand, promising him that he will protect this mother, and his father orders him to do. So he gets ready because they have 4 wizards on their side. And as soon as the leader of the bandits sees that they have a healer, he tells his men not to let them escape, and Arthur starts running with his mother. asking her father not to die, and Adam asks them to get close to him quickly. But one of the bandits starts to attack him. But Adam comes forward saying he's going to stop him and tells them both to run away. And then one of the bandits starts aiming at them with his arrow, and Arthur knows that she's still his killer. But when he throws the arrow, the boy manages to counter it at the same moment. Buddha Sarasult, this little sword, ends up breaking, and the bandit asks show the hell the boy did that, but Ellen ends up hitting him before the guy knows what happened. So she tells Arthur to keep running and not stop, but I think something is wrong because there were supposed to be 4 wizards, and he can count the 3 in battle, and wonders where's the last one, and at that moment, the leader shouts telling Damien to forget the plan, and telling him, and Arthur questions who he is talking to, but soon notices water magic being formed behind and thinks that things are really bad, and when he looks at the top of a wall, the wizard is casting that magic and throws it at the boy, and he thinks that even if he diverts the inhuman, his mother won't be fast enough. In the instant the ball was approaching him, he takes desperate measure, then stops and mentally apologizes to his mother for the injuries playing her away, and being hit by magic, says that he knew that if he couldn't do it, he should at least take the wizard with him, and the boy throws one of his weapons through the magic to the wizard's leg, and starts pulling him. Asha falls and thinks she has to hope the mana thread can hold, and then he starts dragging the magician until he reaches the edge, but the magician manages to hold on, so he stays for a while until the rock breaks, and the two fall down the re, and Durden ventures to use his magic to create a stun hand and catch Arthur when he falls, but the boy already knows he won't make it being rescued, and thinks that at least everyone will be okay. But even so, he starts to cry, thinking who always wanted to be a big brother. And then Arthur wakes up as King Grey again, and then goes to a room, and an elderly man is surprised to see him. He says that the advice is for those who really govern the country, managing politics and economy. He says that in a world full of problems such as decreasing birth rate and limited resources, wars were replaced by duels and armies replaced by kings, and Grey was one of them. That old man says he is admiring his work. As always, he says that although it is very rewarding to be part of the board, he does not mean that he is not jealous of the fame and glory that kings receive from victories, and he asks because Grey went to make that unexpected visit. So Grey takes the cord from his neck with his medal he was wearing and simply says he is retiring, and Marlon is surprised by this. He says that it took him his whole life to become the strongest, but he asks why. Fame or glory? He says that he was still an orphan when everyone he loved left, and he says that he would give up everything he had in that life for a chance to go back to AshBorn and see everyone again, while later he wakes up wondering where he's and asks Shoheiza live, but then he starts feeling pain, and when he looks to the side he sees that wizard completely dead and twisted. So he starts vomiting, and after getting it all out, falls asleep again and wakes up a while later with a la fallen on his face, and he looks to the side and sees some fruits which he could eat, and also Vin's water to drink, and is grateful for the meal. So he goes back to sleep, and a while later he wakes up again and tries to get up, but it can't, so tries again strengthening himself, and thus getting up, and when he stands up he looks at that body and decides simply take the knife that was on him to take with him. So he thinks she survived that gigantic fall, and wonders how much time has passed and where he's, but then he decides stop with the questions, because he has to move on. But then he hears a voice asking if he woke up, and is surprised by this, and automatically his first reaction is to hide, and he gets, I'm afraid that it was that corpse who is speaking, but the voice asks. Shohei's again scared of him, so he starts thinking to himself that he swears to God that if that thing gets him up, he's going to run away. Then, very scared, he gets close to the corpse, but the voice starts to laugh, telling him he doesn't worry because the corpse won't get up if that's his fear, and he stays calmer but still starts worrying again because he can't just trust someone unknown voice, no matter how soft and dignified it sounds. Then he starts asking who the person and asks if she was the one he's aided by pointing his knife forward, but the one who runs away is the rabbit. And the voice speaks again saying yes to his second question, and she says it counts first. Though we'll find out as soon as she arrives at this residence, and he says that it seems quite confident that he will try to find her, but a voice says that she is the only one capable of taking him away, return shown from that place. Then he starts thinking about his home, talking about Ray and Lisa and Horn and James, and he even wonders about his little brother, wondering if they are fine and if they reached Chiro safely. Then he speaks with that voice again, person who is a little more polite, asking if he can bother her with instructions to grace him with her presence. Then she starts laughing, saying that he understands very quickly, but also says that he's a little rude when referring to a lady. Asura called the voice is her voice, but she also says that the feeling is their soit will help you, but in the middle of lines. She ends up saying his name. He wonders how she knows his name from him. He doesn't even have that much time to think about it. After all, the voice says it will show him by enchanting him with magic. And when he suffers receiving the information, he starts to have visions of everything he needs to know. And the voice says that he recommends he leave immediately, as it will be much safer to travel this way, while it is still clear. And after a while he says that, as his body's condition gradually improved, and leaving only some pain, can't help but wonder what kind of magic she used to save him as he fell. And how could she know they were falling, and why she only saved him? He says that the more he tried to come up with an explanation, the more questions he seemed to have, but in this he sees a noise and starts hoping it's what he thinks it is. Then he finds a river, taking off all his clothes and throwing himself into the water, while he is taking a peaceful shower, washing his clothes. The voice says that he is in a pleasantly carefree moment, and hearing her talking. He gets worried and hides his embarrassment, but she tells him not to worry because there isn't much to do. What to see? And after taking this punch in the stomach, he starts to get dressed, and thinks they are just words, and a king must remain calm and imperturbable. Then the voice speaks again, apologizing for him, telling him not to pout, and he keeps thinking that that body is just underdeveloped. And that's all, and so there wasn't much to see, and a while later it continues following, and says that since he fell from the east side of the mountain, he must be close to the domain of the elves. But he's is not race of the fog that the alkal forest is known for. He says that his fear of crossing the clearings due to the presence of animals was suffocated by the fact that only small animals seem to be present, but he says she is surprised that there were no has seen the mana beast with how rich in mana that place is. He says it is pitiful that he can't stay and absorb some mana, but he should hurry because he needs return to his parents. As with his mother pregnant, the stress of her potential death could harm the baby inside her, but the thinks that depends on whether they are still alive. So sometime later, the voice speaks to him again, saying that he is happy that he managed to arrive, get there safely, and hear a pile of rocks in front of him. Tries to talk to her, thinking that it's the voice, but it says that as interesting as it is not a cluster of rock. Conscious then says that he will find it inside that crevice, and in that the boy sees a Luciano comes out of there and gets ready and goes in, telling his father and mother that he will soon be there. At home, as he carefully enters that cave, the voice tells him to be careful where he weighs. He just goes straight down, falling. But the magic of the voice manages to cushion his fall. Then he falls to safety and thinks that a warning that he would fall 2 stories would have been great. But then he looks ahead and starts asking what that is. Coming face to face with a jaguar, gigantic, quite intimidating. And he becomes very scared again, and the voice in turn speaks that they finally met. Then that being gets up and starts walking towards the boy, and says that insects will get into his mouth if it stays open like that. And so he approaches, extending his hand towards the boy, and he is very scared but ends up giving no gore. He gently holds his hand and says that it will take a while for him to open a dimensional portal enough for him to teleport home, and tells him that the special plant is capable of nourishing him over there, so he will be able to eat. And for that, the boy thanks her. Looking around, choosing a fruit, saying that it looks good, and when he looks at the fruit he's the reflection of his own malnourished face. Then remembers his family, shaking his head and thinks she should eat, but then that night appears behind him, pointing at the boy, saying that the taste better, had just scared by that, but ends up taking the fruit indicated, and in that 2 boys side by side to eat. Arthur says that he might be being a little rude, because he said she was a woman, but he wonders what better way to call her, so he says her name is Sylvia, and Arthur asks if there is any problem, if he asks her some questions, and Sylvia asks him to go ahead, says that maybe she won't be able to answer everything. He says that his initial media by Sylvia's appearance is lowly faded. He started asking all the questions it's been in his head since he woke up after the fall, and he wonders what this place is, and why is she alone, and where did she come from, and also how did she get that wand, and lastly why she saved him. And she says that his first question is easy, saying that that place is an area straight that resides between the clearing of the beasts and the Elshire forest. So she says that no one knows from that place. that she was pushing away everyone who came close. Although these are rare cases and Arthur is the first to enter that domain, so the boy says she can call it art and says that her whole family calls her arts. Aang, that is an abbreviation for Arthur, so she says that she can call him that and says that for these questions she is alone, because she doesn't there is no one else. And she says that she has many enemies who desperately want something she has. And the boy becomes apprehensive and she says that she ended up getting that wand in her last battle, Polkaby, for managing to escape. And then she starts asking why. She saved him and says that perhaps she was touched by his courage and sacrifice, or perhaps because she was very lonely, and says that she doesn't understand why, but then apologizes to Art saying that it will withdraw for now, saying that its wound hurts and it has to be in good health time to work on the dimensional portal tomorrow. And with that the boy simply says good night to her, and thinks that this is how the frightening figure wearing the black armor left. Couldn't help but think about how lonely she looked. Then she says, she almost forgot Sai, Najing that his vision is unable to reach where they went, but his family and friends are safe, and she says just in case he's not sure. And when he hears that they're safe, the boy begins to cry emotionally. Then, thanks Sylvia for that, and during the time the boy there he trained and had a lot of fun with Sylvia, and he says that the two of them spent hours talking about all kinds of things, when she wasn't preparing the portal, and he says that those hours became days and those days became weeks, where they spent every moment in the company each other. And although Sylvia never talked about her own life, he slowly began to understand what kind of person was this mysterious being. And right after training his mana, he opens his eyes and sees Sylvia taking care of the berries, and thinks that Sylvia was the personification of the phrase "don't judge a book by its," that he says that contrary to the impression that her traumatizing appearance caused, she was kind, patient, and kind. So she asks if he has already had dinner, saying that the fruits she is holding are particularly tasty and hardly grow anywhere else. And in this she delivers the fruits for him and thinks that she reminds him of his mother when she was kind. But she also he scolded him harshly, and he was wrong. He says he just remembered something unpleasant. Then he says that there was a time when he expressed his resentment towards the bandits. He says that they knew horrible deaths, and if any of them came out alive, he will hunt them down. But in that, she simply flicks the boy's head and throws him back. So he asks what was that? And she says that he is possibly not wrong about these bandits. Deserved death, and she says that she chose not to save the wizard who fell with him, for the same reason then asks why she hit him. And she says that however let his heart be consumed by hatred and revenge, that way he will only hurt himself. And instead he must and always keep moving forward. And she says that he will got through misfortunes again. But he must not let sadness and hatred not his mind, and he must learn from the man face the future with a smile, and only then will he be truly victorious. And after that she asks if hit him very hard, asking if it still hurts. Then he says that being taught about morals and life for a figure who's aimed to be the epitome of evil for some stranger reason affected him deeply. And then she starts calling for air, asking why he doesn't eat the fruit, questioning if it's wrong, and he says it's fine and then starts eating. But then he looks at Sylvia saying that her injury seems to be getting worse. And she tells him not to worry, because that wound becomes infected from time to time. So he asks if this is really the case. And she says that, furthermore, she has been planning to ask you because it is her understanding that humans generally awaken around the age of 12 or 13 and wonder how he formed a human nucleus, already being considered capable of using mana more efficiently than many complete mages. Then he says that his parents told him he's a genius, and she says that then he could possibly won't be able to learn that, and he asks her what he would learn, and she says it's the meditate and absorb mana while moving, and if he is good enough while he's even struggling, and the boy asks how she is doing that. And she says that humans have every linear mentality regarding mana, and it should just start with small movements and thought movements and make your way to that point. And in that the boy starts to do it, but then he can't do it, and says it's easier said than done, so that beasts of bros learn to do this naturally, but as humans generally they wake up much later. Their bodies are not capable of doing this kind of multitasking. And she says that considering that this last fact does not apply to him, if he practices long enough, he might be able to do it. And then the boy lets out a small smile, saying he will do his best. So she says that's how he should. And then they start training. And Arthur tries to catch his mana while moving by him, simply slips and falls down. He says that practicing to your maximum essentially meant being able to fight proficiently while maintaining constantly the internal flow of mana. And as a result, he begins to sweat a lot while putting in practice. And in this, he begins to be able to use the grima while maintaining the flow of mana, and thinking that he can't be telling Sylvia that he did it. But then when he looks back, Sylvia waddling on the floor, and he gets desperate with that scene and screams for her, and he starts to approach his king what happened, but when he gets too close he steps in a pool of blood, and Sylvia holds on tight, and tries to pull her using her mana because he can't achieve almost anything, and thinks that the problem is her wound, wondering why it's getting worse. So the stand-in that he looks at the portal, and finally turns things on, thinking that it can't be that, and questions that it is. That's why she always stopped to make the portal while he was training, and he realizes that her wound is getting worse because she's creating the portal for him to leave. She's doing all this because he fell there, and she tells him everything is fine, but asks how it can be when she is dying because of him. Then he says that he cried. He cried for longer than I would like to admit, and for the first time he cried with a child who is on the outside. So Sylvia asks if he has calmed down, but he says no, and she says they don't have much time together, and she would hate for it to be spent with them blaming themselves over it. And he questions Showa might not blame himself since she's basically sacrificing herself so he can meet her family, and she tells him that he's doing her a favor by allowing her to leave this abandoned cave earlier. And she talks about her name, saying that it doesn't really fit with his shape, and asks if it will improve now by taking off that armor, revealing wings beautiful as well as the very white color. Then the dragon appears in front of him, saying that now she must look a little more like Sylvia, so asks if she's a dragon, and she says yes, assuming that she's what humans call a dragon. But she says that now who is in this form, they have little time for small talk, and she says she should use her original way to end that portal. But now that their disguise is gone, they will soon be here, and asks them who is coming. But in this she's the portal and speaks to Art, listen carefully to her, saying that there are some things she needs to say before they separate. And then he hands him an egg, and he says it wasn't the Evi, but he felt that he could barely hold it. And then Sylvia plucks one of his feathers and tells him to wrap the egging, this to hide his aura, and he questions what all this is. But she asks him to be patient with her for one more thing, and she just touches his nose and makes his hand shine. And he quickly gets some run. It's on his arm, and she says that with this will all be properly explained at the right time. And then he looks into her eyes, asking if everything is fine, and she says she's going to open the portal now, and she says she didn't have time to do the portal, take him straight home, but he should get somewhere close to humans fast, and he wonders if it will be like this if he is leaving her. And then the cave starts to collapse, and she protects him. His wings, and a being arrives there, speaking to Sylvia's law, saying that he advised that it looks like that stubbornness and surrender, and he tells her to surrender now, and maybe he even heals her wound. And then Artie looks at it, saying that it looks like the previous form of Sylvia, and then that monster says that she has already caused him enough problems, but then she uses one of her powers, activating what looks like Jujutsu Mastery, so she talks to Arthur, saying that she has a small confession to make, and says that it's true. Sage Adita, she intentionally prolonged the teleportation spell so she could spend more time with him. Then she says to ask him to forgive. But she has one more selfish request, and asks him to call her grandma, just like that time. But then he starts crying, asking her to just go with him, saying he doesn't know what she did, but everything is frozen now, and they can get out of there together. But she says he must already know that she can't. So she lets him go, saying goodbye to Artie, and throwing him through the portal, and he starts to ask Sylvia not to do that. Remember to call her grandma, and she simply thanks him, calling him his child. And when he passes through the portal, he appears in another place, and stays scared of not seeing Sylvia near him anymore. Then, he realizes that she is gone, and says that he will never. But he will have the chance to see her again. And with that, she starts crying. And after a long time, he says that his head flooded with memories of the almost 4 months he spent with Sylvia. He says that it was a period that seemed long and short at the same time, and he treated Sylvia as his own blood, teaching things that were missing, since he lives for this world. And with that, he falls into a deep depression, but he starts to hear a noise, and asks what is happening. But then he says that she is alive, and she says that he is Sylvia. And if he's listening to that at that moment, does this mean that she has shown what she really is? He realizes that Sylvia must have left him a message earlier. Then she says that as frustrating as it can be, he's not even close to ready to know the whole truth. His body is that of a boy who is barely 4 years. Although his mana core has already reached the dark red stage, he's not bigger. And she says that as a parting gift he infused his only legacy into him, and his future development as a wizard will depend on how well he's able to utilize his gift. But in this one he keeps asking who asked for a gift because he preferred to have her by his side. And
she talks to him saying that she can imagine what he might be feeling at that moment. Sadness, anger and guilt, but she tells him to remember that he has a family to take care of and a purpose to be fulfilled in that life, and she says that her only wish for him is that he can make the joys and innocence of childhood and that he becomes a man who's both parents and she can be proud, and she says that when his mana core crosses the white stage he will listen to her one more time, and at that exact moment she will explain everything to her, and she then says that until then she says goodbye to him, and so he is completely shocked that she knows his truth. So he says that questions continue to torment him for a long time after Sylvia's voice disappeared. He asks how long she knew about his identity and how she knew despite that something was clear. He says that if he is expensive, just training his mind for revenge, this life would hardly be different from his past life, and he says that for now he can only go forward, but first he asks where the hell it is, and to do so he gathers his mana and uses. She wants to run quickly and climb one of the trees, but he says that even though she is imbued with mana, her vision is limited. But one thing was clear, he is in the middle of the forest of Elzhar, and in this he begins jumping through the trees, and says that even though she is barely able to use the mana rotation that hisses left, he is able to use magic for much longer. However, he cannot avoid getting marveling at how he got up there, and he remembers that Sylvia said he should have been sent near other humans, but he thinks it doesn't matter, he will just keep looking the surroundings. That he realizes that he is getting good at this thing of jumping from branch to branch. But then he hears someone screaming and realizes that it sounded human, and he goes there to see what is happening, rolling around, and finally finds the human saying that they hope they can take it with them. But he gets suspicious and comes down from the tree and comes closer and puts his sis in his ear to listen better. Then he hears someone crying and the other someone telling him to shut up of this girl, and then she gets slapped, and Arthur is surprised, and they say they will get ready to go away. They're just a few days away to leave this damn forest, and one of them asks his boss if Elvis is worth a lot of money, and he says that she is still a child. And it starts with all the wrong talk, saying that it must be worth a lot of money because of that, and while he gets very angry realizing that they are slave traders, and then he sees an elf girl being carried by them, and he says he has no idea how those pigs managed to get their hands on forest hounds, but he knew that catching one of them would be his best option to come out of the forest. And when those slave traders, well, with the amount of shit they has been happening to him lately, it seems like he's finally going to be able to let it out a little, and in that he thinks that despite his desire to go home he still needs a plan, and on this he begins to enslave the Dons, and says that the best course of action was to deal with those slaves first. But he says he didn't attack immediately because attacking the four head on would be a suicide really for him, and in this he decided to continue and wait a long time. So he says that gathered the strength to make his move when they let their guard down, so he thinks he's at the time, and throws a seed to the wolves, attracting their attention, and then one of the bandits sends the another go shut those dogs up. So he gets up to go, and Arthur thinks that without a gun he's tired of using a technique from his past life, and he says it's a technique he doesn't even know he was sure it would work in that world. And then he sneaks behind that man, appearing quickly without giving him a chance to react, and attacks him and cuts his neck. So he holds the man, not letting him fall abruptly, and takes the knife from among his clothes, thanking him by the gun. So he continues forward, killing one by one, and one of the men realizes that those dogs stayed quiet and asks why they are taking so long to come back. So he gets up to go after the men, but Arthur throws a dead piece of something in front of him, making what is he, and jumping on the man's back with the knife at his throat, and thus cuts both her and him. Thinks that, as expected, fighting is more difficult and tiring in that body, and he thinks that he should end it quickly while the last two are still sleeping. But that girl who was inside starts to make noise and attract attention, he thinks, because now this is happening, and then those men wake up and see what happened and how they are already alert. Arthur's attack ends up not being effective, and the man manages to stop his sword, but not for example because Arthur uses his magic and cuts his tendons, and thinks that three have already gone. While one shouts, the other ends up becoming alert and going to see what is happening, and he tells him to be careful with that brat because he is a wizard, and the man is surprised throwing his sword outside and says that they don't want to accidentally kill this golden egg that just appeared in front of him. Then he activates the magic in his hand and says that maybe the boy can yield more than that the little elf, and so he quickly goes to Arthur's back trying to hit him. The boy manages to dodge it and the man in turn doesn't stop attacking, but Arthur throws something at his face stopping his attack, and the man asks what the hell is going on, and Arthur uses his blade throwing it towards him, but the man manages to catch it quickly and cut the line of the boy's mana, and Arthur thinks it's gone bad now, and the man thinks he has some tricks. Cute boys attacking him and telling the boy to get his gun. Then Arthur realizes he is very fast, and the man quickly manages to hit him, throwing Arthur away, and tries to catch the boy by calling him a bag of gold, and when he manages to grab the boy's foot, he just gives up because he can't do anything with that little body, and Arthur thinks that condensing mana into the shape of a sword seems to work similarly to wind magic in that world, and he says that this is the case, fire magic should also work, and so he tries condense fire magic on that man's arm, blowing him up, and the bandit's arm goes to bewail you, and he starts making noises saying that the brat is dead, but then Arthur takes a sword and hides in the smoke while the man chirps promising the tower to death. He simply attacks his throat, killing the loudmouth without even him noticing, and when he was alive with his tendons cut, he started asking the boy to wait and asking mercy, but Arthur says he's sure the little girl said the same thing, so he kills the last man, and meanwhile the girl continues crying inside the carriage, so he asks her to come, saying that it is safe and she can go home now, and with that she starts to ask what that is for, and he says that there are things that a child shouldn't see, but she says he's a child too, but he just asks her not to take off the blindfold until he lets her, and she ends up agreeing, and he says that he must be far enough away by now taking off his blindfold, and she can look now, and so after seeing him the girl tries to thank him, but he just says it was a pleasure to meet her, wanting to leave the girl behind, but then she grabs him and asks for him to wait, and her look said everything he needed to know, and he says that he too needs to go home, and says that those bad guys won't come after her anymore. He also says besides, that forest should be safe for elves, but she starts to shake her head, saying no, and she says that beasts are only afraid of adults, and she says that her parents he was told that children would be eaten by hunting dogs or golems in the forest, and the boy he gets upset and asks her if she at least knows how long it will take to arrive where she lives from there, and she says she doesn't know, and then he asks her to wait, saying who will try to get some supplies for them, and the trip probably won't be that long, and in that the girl stays behind, and he thinks he has recovered what he can for the journey ahead, and he says that none of them knew how long it would take, and he also had to think about the trip back, and he thinks it's a shame they can't get the carriage, but maybe it's better this way, and using that chariot they would stand out like a flower in the desert, and so he releases those wolves and says he hopes the elves have something that can take him back to the human kingdom, and so he goes back to the girl and says that he found those clothes inside the carriage and imagined that were theirs, and he says that since it's probably going to get colder she should wear the armhole for on top of them, and the girl thanks him and he caresses her, saying he will take her back home, and he says that while they were walking in the direction she pointed he tried to find out about the child, and then he asks her what her name is, and she says straight and asks what his name is, then he says he is Arthur Lewin, and she asks him how he ended up in the Shire forest, then he says it's a long story, but she says they have time, and he summarizes the whole story, saying he was just separated from his family, so she asks if he came from the human realm, and he says yes, so she asks if it's true that all human men are perverted and they have more than one wife, and he asks who said that to her, and she says it was her grandfather, and in that she doesn't know why this is happening, and says she's sure there are perverts even among alphas too, but remember to ask her if she even knows what the word pervert means, and she says that not really. Then he says that answering her question normally just nobles choose to have several wives, so she says she understands, and he just leaves it subject aside, asking what it's like to live in Eleanor, and she says it's fun because it's a lot of time with her caregivers and her grandfather since her mother and father are busy, and so is she. Says that once she wakes up she will probably have a mentor to train her, and says that she is Eleanor's educational system seems quite egalitarian because they even receive a private mentor upon awakening, but she doesn't even know what egalitarian would be, but he decides to leave it alone, saying that he is just talking to himself, and in that Tesha calls Arthur asking what happened to those bad guys who took him, and they say that they ran into a very unfortunate accident, and she asks if he thinks that they will meet him again, and he promises her that Tesha will never see them again, and in that she thanks him again for everything, so they make food, and he tells her that she should sleep a little, but she asks him how much, and he says he will keep guard outside, and he leaves the cabin to look at the sky, and says that he wanted to use this time to discover what this legacy is that Silva left him, but it seems like it won't be possible because Tesha leaves there asking not sure what. He doesn't need to rest a little either, and she says that her grandfather told her never to share the bed with a boy, but she says she won't tell him, but then he just says that everything is fine, well, saying that she's not that sleepy, and she gets a little down and brings up the subject again, saying who just remembered that mana beasts are more likely to appear if they notice he is a child, so she proposes that for their safety he should stay inside the tent just for safety, and he notices this mess she's getting into, and she says it's not because she's scared, and he says he understands and tells her to just sleep, but she still can't. Until he touches him and finally falls asleep. He says that Tesha went through a lot of difficulty and should rest well, and the next day he says that they continued their journey, and as time passed, the only indicators of its progress were the various unknown scenarios Tesha's initial fear and despair had passed. It was obvious that she had no idea how to interact with him, but she kept smiling, and he says that he admits that worrying about his family and having patience to return home is not. They left him in the best of moods, but even so, he continued to smile in front of her, and at night, he puts up a tent and makes a fire, but while he does this he starts to feel sick and says that what made the journey almost unbearable was the agonizing and unpredictable pain at its core of mana. And seeing him feel sick, Tesha asks if everything is okay with him, and he disguises it by saying that there is no more night. He continues to suffer a lot from that, and the next day he continues taking her when a forest wolf tries to attack them, but the boy gets really scared on them. As they continue on the path, he begins to feel more and more pain and says what is happening. More often now, he asks himself if he should take some action, but says no because he will worry for nothing. And at night he falls asleep and Tesha covers him, and after a while he says that the days passed and Tesha apparently began to recognize the indistinguishable environment, and he says that however his rhythm began to decrease when Tesha's body could not more having to deal with the difficulty of traveling constantly, and seeing her very tired he ends up taking what she was taking it, and he says that as for him he can just strengthen his body with the mana, and he says that the pain continued to grow and it became increasingly difficult to hide it from the worried elf, so she gets desperate when she sees him fall to the ground, but he covers it up by saying he just wanted shit. And on another day, as they continued on their way, Tesha catches Arthur's attention by talking, because as they became such close friends she asks if she could call him Arthur just like his family does it, and he says he doesn't care if she calls him that, and she asks if it's just that, and he understands what she means and says that he would be honored if Tesha was Leaf could refer to this humble peasant like Arthur, and she gets mad saying he's talking like an old man again, and he says it's better than being a crybaby who can't even pee alone without him being around with his eyes closed and ears covered en masse. She tells him to shut up. Tesha starts playing when she looks at a tree, noticing that there is something familiar there, and says that he saw something, but he ironizes saying that he is also seeing things. He sees musgar and leaves and fogs and lots of trees, but he says that despite the difference in mental age, it seemed like they became closer, and so in the meantime she continues to use magic to identify the trees and is happy when he discovers one of them and says that they have arrived. He is surprised by what she is talking about, but the girl simply opens a tree that provides a path and calls him to go quickly, and after passing through the teleport, he just falls down saying he hates these portals, and then the girl nudges him saying that they have arrived, and he is amazed at what sees the city of elves and thinks of the word ancient, saying that that was the only word he sees head, and even that doesn't judge the scene in front of him, so a whirlwind of magic appears in front of him, and they are both apprehensive about it, but then the guards appear kneeling in front. She is happy with the return of the royal princess, and the actor is completely shocked to have heard that he is a real princess, and she is a little shy while hearing this, and the guard says that they were there as soon as they noticed that the real teleportation portal had been used, and they say that the king and queen are coming running, and then they both arrive asking if Tess is okay, and is that he is Alduin Aerolith and Muriel Aerolith, as well as Virion Aerolith, who also arrives there, and seeing that scene he starts to smile at the girl, and Arthur gives her a little touch saying she goes to meet her family, and he is happy to see everyone together, wondering if his mother and his father will react like this when they see him, and Alduin gets up thanking Arthur, saying that not only as king of Eleanor but also as the father of that little girl, and he says that with a small jet of gratitude for helping Tess get home safely he owes her. Accompany him to his house and tell him he can rest a little, and then tell him what happened, and in that Alduin's tone was gentle, but his eyes said that it was not an offer but rather a order, and he says he would be honored to do that, and then Tess just runs up to him, grabbing him and pulling him, saying that there are a lot of things he wants Arthur to see, and the boy says that he's kind of who expected an impressive castle after discovering that Tess was a princess, but upon seeing all that he starts to wonder what kind of cheesy fairy tale he ended up in, and then the queen says that that child is her guest and says that they should take him to drink, shower and to a room to rest, and Arthur thanks him for that, but says that first of all he would like to explain what happened, and they go directly to the table to talk, and he presents with Arthur Lewin from a small village in the kingdom of Frog, and says that it is an honor to be royal families, but in the meantime he thinks it was a bit exaggerated to a presentation, but the discussion will not progress if they treat you like a child, and in that the king says that despite the king of here having humble origins, he seems quite mature and well educated and speaks who would like to hear what happened, and Arthur says he told his journey, starting with a brief report talking about how he was separated from his family after they met with bandits, and he says it wasn't a lie but a half-truth. He says that inevitably when the story it got to the point where he met his daughter the atmosphere changed, and the king got very angry, saying that he should have known they were human. Then Arthur starts saying that with all his might, slave merchant respect is a profession not a race, and in this all the guards point out their swords at the boy and saw their human lower his weapons and start asking for what happened, saying that he saw the slave traders capture his granddaughter and him being a child negotiated with the kidnappers or begged for mercy, but the boy says no. Even though he is a child, he is also a wizard, so he eliminated the slave traders and rescued. But then the guards get angry, asking him how dare he speak such lies in front of the royalty, but then they saw he got really pissed off just looking at him, and the boy said that regardless whether they believed him or not, Princess Tesha was returned safely, so he says that all he wants is to go back to his family and sap him. And after Arthas says he wants to go home, Tessa asks if he's leaving yet, but calling him by a nickname, and his parents are surprised by this, as is his grandfather. So he says that knowing the story, he doesn't think it's appropriate for the human to be in that kingdom for a long time, and he says that in addition, his priority is to confirm that his family is safe and also let him know that he is okay. Then Tessa's father says that leaving aside the past of the two kingdoms, he saved his daughter, and besides, he had the trouble of accompanying her all the way there, which entitles you to an appropriate reward. However, Tessa is still a little sad. Her father says that unfortunately the gate teleportation system connected to the kingdom of Sapim is only activated once every 7 years during the summit conference between the three races, and he says it will take another 5 years until the gate opens, but he says that however, they would be happy to send a group of escorts to take him home safely. So he says that, I would also like to offer you my hospitality, and say that some of them are tolerant enough, but several still hold a grudge against humans because of the war long ago time, and he says that as long as the boy is there he should feel at home, and they will have his escorts ready in the morning. And so the boy thanks him and goes to his room, seeing that everything there shines, and he gets uncomfortable, saying he is too tired for that. And while he goes to take a shower, he starts to feel that pain in his abdomen again, thinking that she is getting worse and worse, and he will sit with Sylvia's egg in his hand, and he thinks he doesn't know what to do and says he wishes she was there to help him. When someone knocks on the door, he will open it, and when he opens it, Tessa is there doing a very bold pout, then headbutts the boy and tells him he's a huge idiot because first he speaks so coldly to his family and now he's already leaving. But he says he wasn't being cold, he was being respectful because like her knows they are the king and queen of that entire kingdom. So he asks why she doesn't told her nothing, and she just gives a huge shameless smile, and he tells her not to be with this cutie, and she says that she doesn't want him to leave anyway, and she says softly that it's because he's her first friend, and she starts to shake. And Thor sees how she is reacting and goes to her, calling her a crying princess, and asks her to. She takes him on a tour of the castle, and they start walking around, and she says that that's probably her favorite place in the whole castle, and she says that if he stayed there until spring he could see all the flowers bloom, so she says that at least he could see the bee-eaters working. And then she takes one of them in her hand, showing him, asking if they aren't pretty, and the boy is surprised by that little light that looks like with a firefly, but then he feels something coming at his back, and he grabs Tessa by the arm, sending her to protect her, and he catches that object that comes flying and uses a counterblow from the person who was attacking, who tries to punch the boy, but he also stops that punch and realizes it's Tessa's grandfather, and he simply says hello without shame. The boy asks what he is asking, if he wants to kill his own granddaughter, but the grandfather says no, it's nothing like that, he was just making a joke because it doesn't kill anyone. So he realizes that it is a toy knife, and the grandfather says that the boy has good reactions and a beautiful instinct, and is surprised that the boy would take what he threw at him and use it against him, and says that the boy's mana usage is measured, creating the best case scenario, but he can see how he was able to kill some slave traders, and Thor can only think that that old man lost completely the notion. And then Tessa asks him to stop bothering Arthur, and he is surprised with her words and says that Arthur must know why he went there, and the boy wonders what would have been the reason. Then he says that it has been a while since he found something so interesting. When they saw it, they raised a small wooden sword, wanting to see what Pereria was capable of, and with that the Arthur, he already uses it to attack, aiming directly at his throat. So Tess is surprised by this, but she used her mana to defend herself and says that this is a very scary brat, and then Arthur attacks him again but only manages to hit a cloak. Suddenly he appears behind his back, aiming for his neck, but the boy quickly manages to defend himself, but he thinks it's too strong, so he tries to punch him in the side, but the boy gets out of the way quickly but still ends up getting elbowed on the other side. Away then he takes his sword again and attacks him, and they quickly continue exchanging blows with Arthur pressing turn, and he thinks that even with mana and minimizing his movements he can't keep up with him, and then he appears behind the boy, and Arthur thinks that this is a chance, but they end up tripping him, but the boy puts his hand on ground and jumps over them, catching his sword again, spinning and thinking that it needs to be faster. Then the sword starts laughing on their forehead, and the boy is thrown away, and Tess in one scene he runs up to the boy and they start laughing, thinking that this is what he deserves for being so arrogant and being surprised, because who would have thought that he would actually be able to hit him. And Tess is very upset with her grandfather, but the coroner doesn't want to stop calling Arthur for a second round, and Tess pinches him, saying she thinks he's already hurt Arthur enough, and says he should have gone easy on the boy, but he says he's afraid that if he had taken lightly, the one who would have judged him would be Arthur, and he tries to be modest, saying that he feels honored, which could be a man. You think so, so highly of him, but you don't seem to believe anything he feels. Honored and Arthur keeps thinking what was this change in mood out of nowhere, but they saw that if so, he must become her disciple, and Tess is completely unsure of what is happening. And saw he continued asking if the boy agreed to be his disciple, but Art questioned whether he's really serious, and he asks why he wouldn't be. He says that in the first place, in conversation he is a human and humans are not even allowed to stay in that kingdom, but they become speech. That the boy wouldn't even try to expel him while he's under his tutelage, he says. Who knows that the boy is much better than other children and maybe even better than some adults, but he reminds Arthur that he can teach something that even the most capable wizards of Thrush ain't. But Arthur continues to deny it, saying that even if he says that, he can't accept it. Not when he doesn't know how his parents, who don't know if he's alive or dead, are. However, the question he would ask if there was a way to see how they are and communicate so that let them know he is fine, and asks the boy if it would be enough, so he asks what to do with that, but then they saw him asking him to wait after all his forehead was almost falling asleep. And with that he orders one of the maids to bathe her and take her to bed, then he goes back to the business, saying he knows he was being a little impatient, but after what he felt during that little duel, this is necessary. He says that the boy is having an outbreak. Unbearable pain in the place where his mana core is located. He wonders if these outbreaks have occurred more frequently, but when Arthur asks how he knows this, he says that the most important thing that as he knows is the fact that he is not aware of what is the cause of the pains, and in this he asks the boy if he doesn't know what a beast's legacy is, and Arthur says that a beast's legacy is. Beast was a term he had never heard of before, but he immediately remembered the moment in which Sylvia touched his core area and they saw speech that he is sure he knows, or even he has already met some mana beasts, but he says that a powerful mana beast, enough to be classified as a class to the superior, obtains the ability to pass on his legacy or his inherent ability forward once, either to his descendant or to someone there's a bond, and he says he won't interfere with how he came face to face with such a powerful legacy, and the stage that the power that is residing in him is doing him more harm than good. Then Arthur finds it strange that he knows all this and wonders if he also has a beast legacy, so they see. He says yes, he is what people call a beast tamer, and he says that is the title which he can obtain once he has completely mastered the monstrous beast legacy within of him, and in that he says he knows how important it is for him to try to get back to his family, but be extremely risky to do this now. He says that the power of his beast legacy is very potent, and he says that if he doesn't control the power he has obtained soon, it will destroy his body from the inside out. And guys, like I said at the beginning, leave a like and subscribe. There will be a new video tomorrow, so let's go. I'm counting on your support to continue releasing more and more videos, because if you want to launch it, I'll see you in the next one.